So you can have something that on paper is just like black and white. This is going to be successful. But if you don't execute it properly down to the restaurants, train them, get them to effectively understand its purpose, get behind it, it's not going to succeed, no matter how good it is.
Hey guys, welcome to the Wine, Whiskey and Weed Show. Today I have a very special guest for you, Brian Phillips. Brian is one of the most important on-premise wine buyers in America. Today we discuss how wineries can tap into corporate restaurant chains and what they need to do, how it all works, and we also discuss some tips for sommeliers on how to increase restaurant wine sales. Just before we dive into the podcast, I have a very special announcement to make. The submission for 2020 Sommelier's Choice Awards is now open. If you are a wine brand, if you are a wine importer, if you are a winery looking to get traction in the on-premise US market, this is the time to enter your wines. This is where wines are judged by leading on-premise wine buyers, wine directors, and sommeliers. Again, this is Sommelier's Choice Awards USA. So go to sommelierschoiceawards.com to learn more on how you can enter your wines there. Thank you. Enjoy the show. So Brian, let's just give our audience a little context here. I know who you are. I just wanted them to understand how big is Darden and what wine volumes are we talking here. Could you just create some context, please?
Yeah, so Darden is multiple restaurant groups or concepts spread throughout the U.S., and we do have a few international properties with some specific brands, but our focus obviously is North America. We have, some concepts are quite small with maybe 23 locations and some up into the over 900 locations. So we are talking over 1,000 locations overall when we take all of our multiple brands together. My focus being on the wine side and delving into some of the higher end, more premium and exclusive spirit programming. Is really with the Capital Grille, Eddie V's Prime Seafood, and Seasons 52, and delving a little bit into other concepts like Yard House and Longhorn. Of course, we are also known for Olive Garden being our largest brand. However, because it's a little more of a static kind of program, I don't really delve into the Olive Garden world much. We have a dedicated team to that large brand.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Amazing.
Yeah. Overall, wine purchases is quite high. I mean, we are the world's largest full-service restaurant group, but there are much larger than us with the fast casual and so forth. But because all of our concepts are really focused on the in-restaurant dining experience, sit-down table service, we are the largest in that realm. We don't delve into a lot of to-go or delivery service direction at this point. But that is a future direction, as we know it's a growing business, and how we can work beverage into that aspect as well is always on the forefront, but not yet a big part of what we do day to day. So ultimate business-wise, we're in the $9+ billion a year revenue range, and you're looking at about 18 to 20% of that year to year being beverage.
Fantastic, amazing. It's a good percent. I mean, I don't know exactly what sort of benchmark people go with. Like, what's a good number? Let's say if a restaurant is doing 1 million in food and beverage sales, what percentage do you think is considered good for the wine and beverage?
Yeah, for if you're a fine dining establishment with a wine forward program, you should be looking at close to a goal of 30%. So you're looking at about a $300,000 beverage program if you're a fine dining sit down, especially if you're doing like wine pairing, pre-fee menus, things like that, and you have a full bar and cocktail program. That's a realistic number to hit if you're on the high end performer level in terms of overall percentage of beverage sales. But typically that is well above the average. We try to hit close to a 25% goal, but most of our more casual concepts are kind of closer to that 20% range.
Understood. Got it. Yeah, I mean, if I break it down now, like if there was a $100 check which we would be paying, I can imagine it being realistic. Like $25 would be towards like wine or beer or something like that.
Exactly. And you have to take into account that a lot of people are just kind of quick in and out, and your lunch business will affect your
Oh
percentages. If
yeah,
you're dinner
true.
only, you should be aiming for a higher percentage because dinner is going to be a higher percentage of beverage sales. But most of our concepts are doing lunch as well.
Got it, got it. So it's a amazing journey. I mean, you must have started somewhere, and you must have encountered a lot of challenges. Plus, at the same time, you must have learned working at different kind of establishments, and now you are one of the, I mean, if not the most important on-premise wine buyer in America. Walk us through your journey, Brian. How did you start, and why are you where you are right now?
Well, it's kind of a lot of people fall into positions. It really wasn't that way for me. I grew up in Chicago. My dad was a big fan of going out to eat and enjoying the food scene and liked to travel, and I kind of fell in love with that aspect. And I think that living in a town like Chicago back then, growing up, it was casual, it was approachable, it felt comfortable, it felt homey. And so I always kind of loved the experience. And so I decided early on that's what I was going to do for a living. I mean, there was really no moment in my life where I said, oh, I'm going to do something else. I mean, started working in restaurants in high school when I was 15, worked my way up in a pretty high-end kind of concept, and private dining and so forth. And then went to college and got a degree in hotel restaurant management because it's what I decided I wanted to do, and pursued it and started working in hotels and getting that hospitality background, which I think is the first step, is just understanding hospitality as a whole. And then it moved into restaurants. I opened up some concepts that were privately owned, and then jumped in with a bigger company such as this, and grew from there. But it all started in the restaurant, working the crazy hours that you work, horrible hours, late nights, weekends, holidays, pretty much most of my life. And up until this position has been the big shift for me, where it's been more at the corporate office level at our base restaurant support center. But it's been a great journey, a lot of great opportunities. But in terms of the beverage aspect, I did not know I was going to go specifically into being a beverage professional and being in the spot I am now. I was just more focused on operations, and I fell in love with wine. And even though it wasn't asked of me or expected, or even really a part of my day-to-day job when I was in the manager partner role or director role, I pursued it anyways because I loved wine. And so I joined every organization I could. I started off with the International Sommelier Guild, became a CWE with Society of Wine Educators, which is a certified wine educator, because I wanted to pass on my love to others. And then now I just this year passed the Master Sommelier Theory exam, and am sitting so I got that one under the belt, and next year we'll be sitting for the tasting portion of the MS exam. So to hopefully put the exclamation point on my journey with achieving the MS exam next year is my big final goal. And that's what ultimately pushed me into being asked or pinned down for the wine director role at Darden.
Got it. So, how much is business side of it? Like, have you learned the business principles or any fundamentals, or expect at that level? I'm sure you must be going through a lot of spreadsheets and numbers, and it's just not the romantic wine side of the business. Where do you learn all that from?
Yeah, so I mean, that's why I'm fortunate that I worked in restaurants, because when you're a managing partner, you have to have your fingers on everything, from your
True.
turnover
So
rate.
you said you tried your own restaurant, so I'm sure you felt the
I've
pain and
opened
you've
restaurants.
done everything.
Yeah, those haven't always worked out. I'll be honest with you.
Yep, it's a tough business.
It's a very tough business. Some work, some don't. Hey, I was happy to have like a 3-year, 5-year run on a restaurant. I'm happy with that. But ultimately, in the day, you have more losses than wins in most cases when it comes to doing your own business like that. But at the end of the day, you learn a lot from your failures. And opening restaurants that didn't work out, or taking opportunities that didn't work out, I wouldn't trade for anything in the world, because that's where I learned the most. You can't get that education from a college degree. You just can't. Especially in this business, you've got to put the work in. You've got to diversify your experiences. You've got to push yourself to where you're constantly always a little bit scared of what's going to happen next, or what might not work out. If you're not stressing a little bit, you're not growing. In this business, unfortunately, you can't just take an easy path and say, oh, I got this degree, knock on a door, let me in and pay me for it. If you don't have real world experience, it's going to be hard to translate that, because I'll tell you, in this position, even working for a large company like this, we kind of create things as we go based upon what we need. There isn't this, oh, let's just plug it in here, and here we have this program that works and does it for us. We have to ultimately.
Yeah, I think it's really like, what you really thought when you were walking the floor, how it should be, that drives up to the management, and then you make that change and bring it back down.
Exactly. And now my biggest fear is, hey, have I become too much of an office jockey where I've lost touch with reality and what's going on in my restaurants day to day? So I make it a point, like, even, right now it's the busy holiday season, so I'm leaving the restaurants alone and trying to stay out of their way. But, I'll start working in the restaurants a couple shifts a week starting in January, just to kind of get that sense of place back and see firsthand what our management team goes through and what we're asking to do, and are the expectations real. You have to have this line of sight as to how things can really function and have that feel for it. So that's always important too. You never want to lose that edge as well.
Yeah, super amazing. I mean, I think your title is, Brian, as what I can see from the signature, was Wine Strategy Darden, right? So
Yeah.
explain me, what does that include? Like, I till what I understand, the definition of strategy is, working towards a goal, and the map towards reaching that goal, right? So let's say 2020, how does your strategy planning look like?
Yeah, so I mean, that's exactly it. I think the title sums it up. What the expectation was when I jumped on board, that it wasn't, hey, just come here and be a sommelier and pick really cool, geeky wines that you love. That's not that, there's a small element of that, but, there's a lot of storytelling involved. But at the end of the day, it's about building a plan. It's about growing the business. It's about getting buy-in.
True. It's like, for example, let's say, how we discussed, like, it's 22% of your revenue should be this, but now let's say 2020, you guys decide it's 26%. Now the question is literally how, and that's the strategy.
Exactly. It's a lot of brainstorming and having actionable plans that are projected out and then followed up on consistently, and then justifying your existence at the end of the year or the program to say, look what I did or didn't do, and taking that ownership.
So can you break us down? Like, is that location based, category based, beverage based? Like, how just on a top level, how does it look like? What would be the first 2-3 pages of that plan?
At my level, it's brand based. It's about the specific concept, overall performance. We're going to have winners and losers by different markets, as always. And the restaurants have their
brand.
own.
You meaning the restaurant brand? Like, for example, Capital Grille will contribute this much, versus Seasons 52 will contribute. Okay.
Exactly. I have to look at each concept as its own business. So I don't get to come in and just say Darden as a whole. Yeah, I'm judged by that, but I have to report to a brand president that oversees each brand, and that's my boss, who I have to make happy with my goals. That will feed into the overall.
So you have a lot of bosses.
Yeah, I do have a lot. Everybody really is kind of your boss, from the director of marketing to the presidents to supply, head of supply, to, of course, head of Darden. Ultimately, it all feeds into the Darden umbrella, but at the end of the day, each brand is measured independently and has to succeed. And so we look at each year. So we do a year plan. When we're this big, you can't really go freaking out on numbers that are week to week. You look at them, but you have to understand that there's a lot of seasonality and ups and downs that are different for every market, and put that in perspective. So you have to kind of test things out, give things their due fair time to pan out and see how it works. So really, we're judged annually. I'm paid annually based upon our performance. And we develop goals together with the brand, with the head of finance for that brand, the head of marketing, and of course the president for that brand. And we say, this is what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. I put things in a projection, and then we kind of measure it as it goes. But ultimately, at the end of the year is where we determine how it performed. And then we have to take a lot into economics. So the thing I'm dealing with right now that have upset and changed and disrupted our plans a bit are the whole EU tariffs that are going on. And then now we're really concerned with the whole Champagne and Italy being included in these tariffs, which are massive. And so I'm working very, very heavily on the supply side to try to secure stateside supply to not be affected. And how am I changing things out? Like a provincial rosé might have to go New World, or I'm going to have to work with that producer in Provence to secure some product sans tariff in order to maintain. But I can never go to the brand and say, hey guys, we got a tariff. It's going to cost us 25% more to operate this year. That's not going to work. I've got to find a way to work around it, and there's no excuse. So we're going to perform better year over year, no matter what's going on in the economy. It's up to me to find ways to work around it and make us successful year over year when it comes to wine and beverage sales. So
what's your overall trend? Like you see beer, spirits, and wine. What category you see still growing the fastest among those three?
It's spirits that are growing the quickest by far. The spirit category is really impressive. And look, as a wine guy, there's that certain part of my pride that's like, oh, I want wine to be growing, but at the end of the day, I'm happy to see spirits growing.
I see a lot of cocktail culture happening as well these days.
It's the whole cocktail culture. I think it's the millennial generation coming in. I mean, look, you have a shift. I think that every generation, once they get settled in, gets older, has money, pays off their school loan debt, is going to be very similar to the prior generation. They might drink a little bit different than their parents, but they'll get back into wine at a high level. And wine consumption's still strong. But it has flattened out and teetered off a little bit, losing that share to spirits. But spirits really delivers a lot as a margin. So financially, it's not necessarily a bad thing to have spirits dominating a little bit more, because spirits generally have a much lower COGS. You can work them into some really nice cocktail programs that demand a really good price point for a really nice, well-made drink. And so, our guests are willing to pay for premium spirits and premium cocktails. That's not a bad thing necessarily. It's just our own pride that says, hey, I'm a wine forward kind of guy. So of course I want to see wine growing heavily, but it has flattened off. Beer has taken a big dive, but a lot of it is just oversaturation of the craft beer market. That's, you're going to have its lumps, ups and downs. Beer will probably settle out at some point. But the one thing that is growing greatly is spirits right now. So we're very progressive in our cocktail programs and developing savvy spirit programs for our brands as well.
Nice. What's the most challenging part of your job, Brian? I mean, I'm sure there are some things which are really hard to solve. What would that be?
For me, it's getting buy-in. You can come up with all the great ideas in the world, but if you don't know how to sell them and get buy-in, it doesn't matter.
Can you elaborate? Like buying, meaning what I can understand is you buying, or you having customers buying your product.
It's more internal. It's the buy-in with your teams. Ultimately, for me.
Oh, understood.
Yeah, for me, if someone comes to me with a great idea or a great wine or a great program we can do with their wines, I ultimately have to go and sell that just as strongly, if not even more so, than the person, my supplier, who's selling it to me. I have to go to the brand and say, hey, here's a great idea. How can we do it? How can we work it? I have to sell that harder sometimes than the people actually doing the salesmanship. Then from there, you have to follow it all the way down to where there's the moment of truth, which is in the restaurant, where your service team has to sell that idea for that brand. And then you have hundreds of restaurants doing it that you have to all get their buy-in on, their support, and their interest and passion for it in order to make it successful. So you can have something that on paper is just like black and white, this is going to be successful. But if you don't execute it properly down to the restaurants, train them, get them to effectively understand its purpose, get behind it, it's not going to succeed, no matter how good it is.
Now, this is, for example, you're talking about wine. So I'm trying to imagine what kind of example would that be? Like, let's say you have this summer and you want a champagne month. Is that like a concept you come up with, and then you have to roll that concept in all the restaurants sort of as much as you can, or whichever way? But is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, exactly. Like, just to take off that champagne example you mentioned. So we're currently doing that. Actually, we're featuring Veuve Clicquot for the holidays at Eddie V's Prime Seafood.
Okay.
And we're pouring not only Veuve Clicquot, but we're pouring the vintage Veuve, we're pouring the rosé, and we're pouring a very expensive Veuve Clicquot La Grande Dame, which is their flagship tête de cuvée. It is not a cheap bottle. It'll cost.
So most of the friction, understood. I got the point. Most of the friction comes from internal staff not hand selling that particular item.
It can be.
Where is the actual problem?
Yeah, it can be. So you have the director of operations, senior VPs, things like that give a and you have managers within the restaurant who are paid on the performance of the restaurant who get a little nervous when I say, hey guys, you have to sell this bottle that costs well over $100 by the glass. And we're going to pour all four of these by the glass. And they have to consider, well, how can I sell through all this expensive champagne without it going bad? Because you pop a bottle of champagne, it's only going to last maybe 2 days. So you really have to have some volume there. So it's a scary proposition to throw out there to a restaurant, ask them to perform. And not only that, I mean, you might be in Miami where it works very well. And then we have a location in Cleveland where it doesn't. And so you have to kind of make it work for the brand and get them to understand how it really promotes what we're trying to do and say what we're about. It's part of our culture. We're going to be known for selling top-notch champagne at this brand. And we want our guests to know that, and there's a value in that equity that we're building. And so that's
you got to look at the experience part of it and connect it all. Yeah,
exactly. And it's just like anything. If someone's really passionate about it and they love what you're doing, they're going to go out and sell it. And if they don't, they're gonna pander it out. They're not gonna really promote it. They're not gonna get their team's buy-in, and then it kind of.
No, I hear you loud and clear. In fact, today I just wrote an article and just posted on my personal LinkedIn, which was the most important person in the wine sales supply chain is the wine rep. So it's pretty much the same thing. That 5-minute conversation that happens, between the wine rep and the retailer is it. I mean, either a winery's brand is going to go into that account or never is that going to happen. So if that sommelier is going to recommend to their customers, it's going to happen. Your whole thing works. But if is just not in the mood, nothing's going to work.
Yeah, it's a fine line. Like I greatly respect all of our wine professionals in the restaurants, and they're very savvy, and they do a lot of their own great programs and wine dinners. And even though I have a very large core wine program, they still have a lot of freedom to build up the rest of their wine list. And so there's a lot of pressure on them, and they know what they're doing. And at the end of the day, everybody wants to be successful. So you just have to get them to also buy into what you're trying to do as well, while supporting their ideas. And it's a kind of a mutual back and forth fine line. You don't want to be, trying to stamp out what they're trying to do as well. You want to encourage their growth and what they're trying to do, while at the same time supporting your ideas. I find that the hardest thing, because it takes the most amount of your time. It's a lot of follow-up. It's a lot of training.
And it's a big you have to have a lot of you have to win a lot of people. I mean, basically, it's a big it's pretty much putting an idea into execution.
Exactly. It would be a lot easier if I could go down the street and go meet with the manager and talk to the teams and tell them what we're doing firsthand. But I can't. It's not easy for me to get from Orlando, Florida, where I'm based at our office, to Seattle, Washington, very quickly, and then back to New York. So there's no way you're going to be able to visit all, 58 Capital Grille locations to talk about a program face to face. You have to do it through a monthly call, through training guides, through training videos, and there's never.
So I was just going to come on the training part of things, Brian. Like, what tips can you share, not only for your own wine directors, but like other overall wine directors? Like, how can they increase wine sales in their restaurants? What have you seen work?
I think that it's going to be different for everybody based upon your size and concept. If you are a couple restaurants, there's a totally different approach, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend the same kind of investment and involvement we're doing on a national program. But we do always work closely with our training teams that oversee each brand and work with them to develop training tools. So first and foremost, you have to give them the tool to utilize in the restaurant, so that a manager in the restaurant can pick that up and train the team with it. And that's going to be a video that we always do. We do server cards that go in their server books, posters in the back service alley, so they're always seeing what the wines are and what the program is. We do leaders guides. We have our suppliers, who are great partners that represent these wines nationally, have their educators go into our restaurants on our behalf to taste them on the wines, to train them on the wines, tell the story. But at the end of the day, what it's really about is the story. You've got to be a great storyteller. You have to get them to be interested in it. That's how people are drinking wine today. They want something juicy, pardon the pun when we're talking about wine, but they want something they can grab onto and understand. And then they have to know why they're selling it. What's in it for them? How does this drive business? How does it How does it satisfy our guests more? How does it define us from the competition? How does it make them money at the end of the day? And then, you have to give them kind of really quick, easy one-liners as well. Something that you have to manage the message. What are they messaging to our guests? You have to message that. And so you have to define that for them and how you want it spieled. What is it that they're saying to the guest?
100% agreed. In fact, I say the same thing. Like wineries need to have that one-liner for the reps and sommeliers every time. There's just that one line which they can tell the consumers.
Exactly. And when you're this large, something of interest for suppliers would be, when we're looking at a program and we're partnering with somebody to do a program, we're really looking at suppliers that we know can execute and support it on all fronts, and training and supporting the restaurants, getting into the restaurants, getting into the product they need, and helping us get the team buy-in and education is essential. That we will sometimes pick a program solely on the supplier's ability to execute those elements. That's as important.
Yeah, that was actually my follow-up sort of question, where what sort of programming and logistical requirement you have for some brands to qualify for corporate placements. Like do you expect them to be nationally distributed, let's say Southerns or Glazers network, or what sort of minimum requirement is there even to qualify for them to even have a meeting?
Yeah, it depends on the size of the program. For something like just, hey, you're going to get a great by the glass placement that we're going to pour on, say, a core event. It might just be a winery direct and look, it might just be, hey, send them some training materials, or I'll do the training materials myself. But if it's something like the limited time offer with a lot of promotions behind it, and it's guest driving, and there's a difference between just having a great wine on the menu that a guest is going to say, hey, that's great, I'm going to buy up to it, and they're already in the restaurant anyways, versus trying to get guests to your restaurant. That's a whole nother level. That's where you need somebody on a national level who has people in the field located in all your major markets that within maybe 1 or 2 weeks time have the ability to hit every restaurant face to face and talk about the program, do training, bring in, an educator, and be a local point of contact for those restaurants when they need help or a supply issue comes up. If you don't have people in the field on a national level that can get things done quickly, it's going to be a hard sell for you to get into a big national program that we're putting a lot of marketing dollars behind to get guests in the door. And once you promote something and guests show up specifically for that program and you don't have the product, or the service team doesn't know about it or can't effectively talk about it, that's a big failure. You can't have any of the steps. So that's where we do need people that have great bandwidth across the nation.
Amazing, understood. So let me just break this down for our audience. So what exactly we're talking here, guys, is there are two types of scenarios. It is a catch-22 position. One is either you build Kendall Jackson, where everyone knows and they're ordering and the restaurants don't have to do anything, or you support and you do a lot of stuff and you're national and you push and your feet on the ground and you do everything before you even present a meeting.
Exactly. Like when you look at somebody like, say, take Jackson Family, for instance, they have a great, they have a very deep team of educators, master sommeliers, supply team analytics, supply channels that you just don't have a lot.
Yeah, they're like partners. They help you solve some problems which you guys can rely upon, right?
Yeah, they can better execute a large scale national program at times. And it doesn't mean we automatically discount people that don't have that necessarily, but they really have to prove that they
have. We're just saying it's a requirement. It's more of an expectation, because you have to feel for the restaurant as well.
Exactly.
You just can't supply the wine and forget about it. You got to understand their business.
Exactly. And, you have people locally in the market that understand how it works in Dallas versus how it might work in, say, Orlando, Florida. Two different markets completely. And
I think in all honesty, Brian, it makes it easy for you to even work with an educated supplier. We're not saying you're small or big, but we're just saying educated supplier. If they understand, what all goes behind the science of a corporate placement, then your job is much easier.
Exactly. And, one of the fun parts of my job is finding some small little producer that's doing some one-off stuff. And I've even helped some of these producers get distribution so that we can have it in our restaurants if it's something I really fall in love with. But it's not going to be the wine that we're promoting in a national program to drive people to the door. There's just too many variabilities, that could come with that. So.
Got it. Got
is
it.
about.
So I think you said, one of the things you said, you storytelling is, I mean, we've been hearing this term, storytelling is a way to sort of hand sell and things of that nature. So in an interview, when you're interviewing, or you may have a manual, like a standard operating procedure where you identify some skills for sommeliers, do you test them that are they a good storyteller, or what kind of skills are you looking for when you are interviewing for, sommeliers?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's a good problem to have that we have such a low unemployment rate. But in all honesty, for the hospitality business and restaurant business, you kind of want some unemployment rates to go up because it's tough. You're fighting for every person right now. The qualified people are, they're far and few between. And so what we really look for is people that want to grow with us. So the first thing we're testing for is people skills first. Are they a people person? Are they someone who can put the team before themselves? That's most important. If there's someone that's coming in with some wine game, they might be a certified sommelier. We have a lot of sommeliers in our restaurants. We need a sommelier that's not about them, but about the team, and looking to make other people sommeliers. We want people who will spark more passion for wine, for service. And, certifications are great, but it's not the most important thing. We want people who want to grow with us and want to help others grow with them. And none of that is wine-based questions. We're not asking them to name, give me all the communes north to south of Burgundy. I don't think that comes up.
Yeah, it's still the basic hospitality characteristics, right? That you're looking for, like the server characteristic, like how humble, how likable.
Exactly. If you look within our company, the presidents of our brands were all people that worked within the restaurants, either as managers. Some of them started off as servers. Some of our directors of marketing were hostesses. So these are people that we're growing to build our business, because if you don't have bench strength, it's hard to grow your business. It's hard to open a restaurant if you can't count on a manager and move them from one restaurant to another and have an experienced manager opening a very important restaurant in a new market. So really, we're looking for bench strength, people we can build and grow, and we'll support them on anything they need. If we need them to get more wine knowledge, we'll give them that while they're in the door. But first, we want to see them be someone that's about hospitality first, and someone who's going to be a team player and work with others and kind of drive that passion and build the culture. So I know that.
So you're trying to avoid churn rates, basically. You're looking for long-term as much as you can, right?
Exactly. I know that's kind of a broad answer, and I wish it sounds easy when you say it, but it's so hard. I've been in the restaurants trying to staff new restaurants.
No, I get you. You're looking for soft skills, basically. You're just looking for
exactly
a good person.
Exactly. Get a good person first that's willing to learn it, put the time and effort in, and you'll be much happier 3-6 months later than getting someone who's already super experienced that's going to leave you because they weren't made to feel like a superstar enough, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So
absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
What about Brian? Let's add some value for the restaurant professionals here. Just one question for them. What are some programming or promotional ideas that have worked, to increase wine sales? How do you market some programs like Wine by Glass, or some tactical advice?
Yeah, so the program we're probably most known for, there's a few for brands. So let's take the Capital Grille. We're doing a program called Generous Pour. The Generous Pour is, again, a great opportunity to tell a story. And I think that's what people really buy into. So it's an annual summer wine event where you can come in, you can try 7 great wines, but you're not forced to a wine dinner experience per se. You go to a wine dinner, you're forced to sit at a table next to somebody maybe you don't know. You wait for it to start when everybody shows up. Someone comes around, talks about the wine, pours it for you per course. You don't get to order what you want off the menu. It's kind of set. It's a little stuffier. Those are fine. I don't have anything against those kinds of wine dinners. But with the Generous Pour, it's a very casual process where you can come in, order anything off the menu. The service team is really well trained on pairing a specific producer or a specific theme of wines, a flight, with whatever you order. And you can try all of them and kind of go back to the ones you like the most. So it's a really amazing program. And so, last year we've worked with a lot of different single wineries. We've done different programs. We focused on, women of the vine in the past, where it's specific women producers that have taken over. We've focused on new generations of winemakers. We focused on specific appellations, and I really like the ones where you get to focus on a specific wine producer and someone who's maybe kind of well known, but people haven't had the opportunity to try all their wines side by side to understand what that producer's about. And I can't give away what we're going to be doing next year, unfortunately, but I'm really excited for
Got it.
partnering with an excellent wine producer that's really well known, and having them go out and be able to talk about the different wines so that guests can understand what they're doing. So that's a program that drives a ton of people to our door. I mean, anyone that comes in our restaurant, that's what they order. 80% of the time they sit down, they're ordering the Generous Pour Flight. That's pretty amazing.
Got it. But apart from the restaurant inside, like how do you promote that outside the restaurant? Like, digital marketing or signs on the windows? What other things do you do?
That's, we don't put billboards up. That's not that kind of a brand. So it's all digital. It's directly reaching out to our guest base that we've collected. They've signed up to receive information through OpenTable reservations as well. And we put it out there. And we do a lot of social media. We work with a third-party marketing company, and we'll host dinners, and they'll do some, I'll host an actual example of the dinner. They'll come in and review it, and they'll post the review.
So do you like data mine? I mean, let's say there are this 1 million people who dined, but do you know, like, of that 40,000, are this people who drank wine or are beer people? Do you have that sort of data as well?
Oh yeah, we do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
we track the preference of every single item on our menu that we sell in every restaurant and all our programs, and know how it performs and how it does. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we use those numbers to see what our guests want, and you have to pay attention to that and ebb and flow with it and make sure we're delivering what they want. So we know where our average price point is, what our average bottle price is, how a certain program performs by each location. And yeah, it's
What about the deco? How do you work around the deco to create that ambience to drive wine sales?
in terms of driving wine sales, like if we work through that data, what we're really seeing is, are we having ups and downs? So it's really about year over year comparisons. A lot of our programs aren't new. We've done them for many years. So the Generous Pour, for example, is 11 years in now. So we will look at how it performs year over year. And ultimately, one of the main things too is, how is it performing on social media? How are the clicks? What we have what's called an electronic guest survey, where we actually get surveys back from the guests after they dine with us as to how they felt about it. And we track all of that, and we will get thousands of them. And it gives us a good idea of where we are. Now, if you're a smaller restaurant, standalone restaurant, it's a little more challenging. You just have to kind of do it based upon your own internal numbers, but also be on the floor and talking to the guest. And we don't have that luxury, so we really do have to find other ways to get that information. And that's usually through direct feedback, through online surveys and tokenization, which is a whole other world that I don't completely fully understand myself. But yeah, it's interesting to see what's going on, and each program is kind of has its own goals to hit year over year.
Mm-hmm. All right, super, Brian. So one last question, I was very interested in this personally. So how do you measure wine performance? Let's say you have this 10 wines in your menu. How frequently do you measure that? Like, let's say every month you will see which were the worst two, and how do you know it's the worst two, and what do you do about it?
Yeah, so that we have every restaurant typically has a point of sale system. That's that little computer that they ring the order in on, right? You see nowadays the handheld ones a lot. You've seen those a lot, the handheld ones, but essentially it's all the same thing. It's a point of sale system. And from there, we track the sale of each item, and we have what's a preference. And a preference number is just basically how its percentage overall is preferred over another item, how it sits within the category. And then we read the margin as well. So you might have something that's a lower preference item. Maybe you have a very high-end Cabernet that you sell for $30 a glass, right? And it maybe, of course, isn't going to have the same preference as an entry-level glass of Prosecco, but the margin on it's very high because it's a higher-end item, higher cost, but higher margin. you get a little bit more reward at the risk, and you'll say, well, that's a better performer than something that's selling more because of what it brings to the table at the end of the day. So you have to look at it.
It's like dollar contribution, correct.
And you want to make the guest happy, so it's not always about the dollar either. You have a lot of guests that like Prosecco. You want to make them happy. So you have to make sure you have your high preference and your high margin items equally balanced and make sure that they're all doing their part. And that's how you basically do it at the end of the day. And then you look for better wines that can maybe.
So within each category, you will have you'll break down the entire thing, right? Like you'll have a high margin. You'll have internal categories, and then within that, you will have your best and worst items.
Exactly. And if there's something that's not performing well, that's just something we have to consider another opportunity for another wine, or just do away with that category altogether.
And how do you blow it off? Like you sort of have banquet or weddings or parties, or what's the best way to sell non-performing inventory?
That's a tough one, and ultimately it comes down to the restaurant, unfortunately. But when we do announce that we're doing a deletion, we have to again train on wines that we're not going to be carrying anymore, which sounds kind of odd. But you have to train on the sell-through focus, and we make it part of a daily pre-shift. So we'll say, hey guys, here's our delete list. Here's what needs to come off the list. Our goal is to sell through it in 3 months. And here's some daily rewards your staff. Have a meal for the top performer, a bottle of wine you can provide your top performer who sells through these wines. And just try to burn it off through just calling it out every day. Here's a focus, and here's the reward if you can sell through it.
Yeah. Understood.
It's pretty straightforward.
Like just hand selling and incentives. Yeah, got the point.
Yep.
Super, Brian. Amazing. Thanks for the insights. Have you got anything else you would want to share and cover?
No, really. I think, at the end of the day, to me, wine and beverage is all about culture. If you have a beverage culture, you're always winning. And I think that's the long battle we're always trying to go for. So to me, it's always just about trying to build the people up within the restaurant to do the best they can and support them in doing it. And that's kind of what at the end of the day, that's what my job really is summed up. Even though there's a lot of technicality.
I think you just reminded me of Buffalo Wild Wings by saying that they've created this beer culture, and wings is the secondary thing now.
Exactly. There you go. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Great talking to you.
Thanks a lot, Brian. Amazing. Have a good rest of the year. So guys, hope you found value in this. Try to dissect everything that we said, and it will help you pitch the national restaurant buyer better. Write down every single point and work your business plan around those metrics, and try to pitch that more than anything else. If you haven't yet subscribed, please subscribe to the podcast. And again, one final time, an announcement for Sommelier's Choice Awards. The submission for 2020 Sommelier's Choice Awards is now open. If you are a wine brand trying to get traction in the on-premise US market, you need to enter in Sommelier's Choice Awards. Thank you. Enjoy.